There is something happening inside you right now that has kept your ancestors alive for hundreds of thousands of years. A quiet, ancien système, older than language, older than memory, running beneath every thought you've had today. Tonight, we're going to follow it somewhere surprising, somewhere most people never look. Welcome to Sleepy Science. Wherever you are right now, perhaps lying in the dim quiet of your room, perhaps still carrying the weight of a long day, allow yourself to settle into this moment. We'll trace 100 psychology facts about stress, what it is, what it does, and why it may be one of the most misunderstood forces in the human story. From the first spark of adrenaline in a threatened body, to the quiet chemistry of post-challenge growth, to the unexpected science of becoming stronger through difficulty, these gentle journeys through the psychology of the mind help curious, restless people find a softer place to land at the end of the day. A quiet like, a subscribe, as a share with someone who needs this tonight. Each one helps another tired mind discover this space. It means more than you know, one sleepy soul at a time. Thank you for being here. Settle deeper into wherever you're resting now. Let your shoulders release, your jaw unclench, your breathing grow a little longer, a little slower. You don't need to hold on to any of these facts tonight. Just let them drift through you, like a quiet conversation in another room. Feel the warm, familiar heaviness of a body finally allowed to rest, thoughts loosening their grip, the day beginning to blur at its edges. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're resting where the mind holds its oldest, quietest knowledge. Let your awareness soften with the gentle weight of a body that knows how to heal. And now we begin. Stress is not a flaw in the human design. It is the design for most of our evolutionary history. The stress response was not a problem to be solved. It was the solution itself. When a threat appeared, the body mobilized. Heart rate rose. Blood moved toward the muscles. The mind sharpened its focus to a fine, bright point. This cascade of changes happened in milliseconds, and it kept people alive. The stress response is older than the human species. It appears, in some form, in nearly every animal with a nervous system. What we call stress today is the echo of that ancient, life-saving machinery, still running, still trying to protect us, even when the threats have changed entirely. The word stress entered psychology relatively recently. For most of human history, there was no single word for what we now call stress. The concept was formalized in the 1930s by a Hungarian-Canadian physician named Hans Selye, who noticed that laboratory animals exposed to various unpleasant stimuli all showed a similar physical response, regardless of the specific stressor. He borrowed the term from engineering, where stress describes the pressure applied to a material. Selye proposed that the body, like a bridge or a beam, responds to pressure in predictable, measurable ways. His early framework divided stress into two categories: distress, which harms, and eustress, which helps. That distinction, largely forgotten in popular culture. is at the heart of everything we'll explore tonight. Eustress is the stress that feels like excitement. It is the sensation before a performance, the quickening before a difficult conversation you've prepared for, the pulse that rises when you step towards something you genuinely want. Researchers have measured eustress physiologically. It looks similar to distress in some ways, with elevated cortisol and increased heart rate. But the subjective experience and the downstream biological effects are meaningfully different. Eustress tends to be short duration. Tied to a challenge the person feels capable of meeting. Distress tense tollinger, tied to challenges that feel uncontrollable or inescapable. The same chemistry, different meaning, profoundly different outcomes. The stress response begins in a small, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala does not think. It reacts. It is constantly scanning incoming information for signs of change, operating faster than conscious awareness. When it detects something that calls for attention, a shift in the environment, a subtle signal of difference, it sends an immediate message to the hypothalamus, which begins the quiet coordination of the body's response. The hypothalamus then activates the autonomic nervous system, which controls the body's involuntary functions. Within seconds, the body is in a different state than it was a moment before. The remarkable thing is how little awareness we have of this process as it begins. The autonomic nervous system has two major branches that work in opposition to each other. The sympathetic nervous system activates in response to challenge. It is the accelerator. The parasympathetic nervous system promotes rest and recovery. It is the brake. In a healthy stress response, both systems are functional and responsive. The sympathetic branch activates when needed. Then the parasympathetic branch returns the body to baseline. Problems arise not from the activation itself, but from the failure to return, when the brake never fully engages, and the body remains in a low-grade state of arousal long after the original situation has passed. When the sympathetic nervous system activates, the adrenal glands, small triangular structures sitting atop the kidneys, release a cascade of hormones. The first to arrive is adrenaline, also called epinephrine. It travels through the bloodstream almost instantly, causing the heart to beat faster, the lungs to breathe more efficiently, and glucose to flood the bloodstream as a rapid energy source. Adrenaline also redirects blood away from the digestive system, which is not needed in moments of acute arousal, toward the large muscle groups of the arms and legs. This is why, during heightened states, some people feel their stomach quiet or their appetite disappear. The body, in its ancient wisdom, simply redirects its attention for a while. Alongside adrenaline, the adrenal glands release a second hormone, cortisol. Where adrenaline is fast and brief, cortisol is slower and more sustained. It continues the work adrenaline began, keeping energy available, modulating the immune response, sharpening certain types of memory. Cortisol has become culturally synonymous with harm, often described simply as the stress hormone, with the implication that less is always better. This is a significant oversimplification. Cortisol is necessary. It regulates inflammation, supports immune function, and plays a role in waking the body each morning. The problem is not cortisol itself. It is cortisol that never fully recedes. One of the most counterintuitive things about the stress response is what it does to memory. Cortisol, in the short term, actually enhances the encoding of certain memories, particularly those associated with the stressful event itself. This is why intensely emotional experiences tend to be remembered more vividly than neutral ones. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. If something required your full attention, it was worth remembering in detail. The body prioritizes that encoding, making the memory more durable, more accessible. The complication is that this same mechanism, under conditions of chronic stress, can begin to distort memory rather than sharpen it, holding on to the emotional residue of experiences long after they would naturally fade. The stress response affects perception, literally. Under acute stress, the visual field narrows, peripheral awareness decreases. Attention becomes focused on whatever is perceived as most relevant. This phenomenon is a feature rather than a flaw. It ensures that a responding animal is attending to what matters, not to everything else at once. In modern contexts, this same narrowing can make stressful situations feel larger than they might otherwise, because the broader context, the resources, the alternatives, the people who care, falls outside the narrowed field of attention. One of the documented effects of stress reduction practices is a literal widening of attentional focus. So, why is stress actually good for you? The most direct answer comes from a concept researchers call hormesis. Hormesis is the biological principle that exposure to a mild or moderate stressor can stimulate adaptive responses that make an organism stronger, more resilient, and more capable. The same principle that makes exercise beneficial, the controlled stress of muscular exertion, causing the body to repair and grow stronger, applies, in varying degrees, to psychological and physiological stresses of many kinds. The stress response, in appropriate doses and durations, is not damaging the system. It is training it. Tonight, we'll follow that thread, from the chemistry of the brain, to the biology of resilience, to the quiet science of what difficulty does to the human capacity for growth. The field of stress research experienced a meaningful shift in perspective around the early 2010. A large study following roughly 30,000 adults in the United States found something that surprised many researchers. Higher stress levels were linked to increased mortality, mainly in people who also believed that stress was harmful to them. Those who experienced high stress but did not share that belief showed notably different outcomes. This was a correlational finding. It revealed a connection, not a confirmed cause, and it has been thoughtfully debated since. But the pattern it uncovered was enough to prompt a real shift in how researchers began thinking about stress and perception. The relationship between what we believe about our difficulty and how that difficulty moves through our bodies became an open and intriguing question, one that has guided a great deal of research ever since. The biology of how we interpret stress is becoming clearer. When people are told that the physical sensations of stress, the racing heart, the heightened breath, are signs that the body is preparing to meet a challenge. Their cardiovascular profile during stress changes measurably. Instead of the constricted blood vessels associated with a threat response, the profile begins to resemble the cardiovascular pattern of courage. Blood vessels remain more open. The heart still beats faster. But the stress response now looks physiologically more like readiness than fear. The interpretation, communicated in a single sentence, altered the body's chemistry. There is a specific type of stress that researchers have found worth studying closely: challenge stress, where demand and capacity feel genuinely matched. It differs from threat stress, in which demands are perceived as exceeding resources. Challenge stress has been associated with improved cognitive performance, faster problem-solving, enhanced creativity, and stronger immune function in the period following the stressor. Threat stress tends to produce the opposite pattern. The external situation may be identical. The internal appraisal determines which response is activated. The appraisal system, the mental process by which we evaluate whether a situation is manageable, is located largely in the prefrontal cortex, the brain center of higher reasoning and executive function. The prefrontal cortex can, in essence, modulate the amygdala's initial signal. It cannot silence it entirely, but it can contextualize it, reframe it, and soften the downstream physiological response. This is the neurological basis for the everyday experience of talking yourself through difficulty. You are not imagining that it works. You are activating prefrontal circuits that genuinely dampen the stress cascade. The capacity for this modulation, however, decreases under conditions of sleep deprivation, hunger, and prolonged chronic stress, which is why self-regulation becomes harder precisely when it is most needed. Stress and learning have a more intimate relationship than most people recognize. Moderate stress at the time of learning enhances memory consolidation. This effect appears to be mediated partly by cortisol's interaction with the hippocampus, a brain region central to the formation of long-term memories. When cortisol levels are moderately elevated, the hippocampus becomes more efficient at encoding new information. This is why studying for something that genuinely matters tends to produce better retention than reviewing the same material in a state of complete relaxation. The stakes activate the machinery. The challenge signals the brain that this information is worth keeping. The relationship between stress and the immune system is more nuanced than the popular narrative of stress weakening immunity. Acute, short-duration stress, actually activates and mobilizes immune cells, preparing the body to respond to potential injury or infection. This is a sensible design. If you are under physical challenge or threat, it would be adaptive for your immune system to be on standby. The immunosuppression associated with stress occurs specifically under conditions of chronic, unrelenting stress. When cortisol remains elevated for extended periods and begins to blunt the immune response that it initially enhanced, the timing and duration of the stress, rather than the stress itself, determines the immune outcome. Post-traumatic growth is one of the most significant findings in stress research of the past 3 decades. It refers to positive psychological change that emerges from the struggle with highly challenging life circumstances. This is not the same as saying trauma is beneficial. It is not. Rather, it describes the observed phenomenon that a meaningful proportion of people who navigate serious adversity, illness, loss, profound disappointment, subsequently report increased psychological strength, deepened relationships, a greater sense of personal capability, and a richer appreciation for life. The growth does not come from the trauma itself, but from the effortful process of reconstructing a worldview that has been shaken. The stress is not the teacher. The grappling is. The nervous system has a fascinating capacity called allostasis, the process of achieving stability through change, rather than maintaining a single fixed state. A healthy nervous system continuously adjusts to meet anticipated and actual demands. This ongoing calibration is not a sign of instability. It is the sign of a responsive, adaptive system. What researchers call allostatic load refers to the cumulative wear from frequent or sustained activation of this adaptive system. Moderate allostatic load is normal and healthy. Excessive allostatic load, from chronic, uncontrolled stress without adequate recovery, is where the biological costs accumulate. The difference between a trained athlete and someone who never rests is not the presence of stress. It is the presence of recovery. Stress hormones play a direct role in neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to form new connections and reorganize existing ones. In the hours and days following a challenging experience, elevated cortisol and other stress-related factors influence the expression of proteins that support synaptic growth and long-term potentiation. The mechanism underlying learning. Research from the past several years has identified specific signaling pathways by which moderate stress prepares neural circuits for change. The brain, in the aftermath of a well-met challenge, is literally more malleable, more ready to update its models of the world. This is part of why people often report that difficult experiences, in retrospect, accelerated their personal development in ways that comfortable periods did not. There is a concept in developmental psychology called stress inoculation. The idea that exposure to moderate, controllable stressors in childhood builds a more resilient stress response system in adulthood. Studies in animal models and in human populations suggest that children who face mild to moderate adversity and successfully navigate it with adequate support and resources develop more robust hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis regulation than children who face either no adversity or overwhelming adversity without support. The key variables are controllability and support. The stress, in this context, is not harmful. It is calibrating the system for the more complex challenges ahead. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, running from the brainstem through the neck and chest into the abdomen, plays a central role in the stress recovery cycle. It is the primary pathway of the parasympathetic nervous system, and its tone, the degree to which it is active and responsive, is one of the best physiological markers of stress resilience. People with higher vagal tone recover more quickly from stressful events, show more flexible emotional responses, and demonstrate better regulation of heart rate variability. Vagal tone can be measured, and it can be trained through practices including slow breathing, humming, and certain forms of social engagement. The body has built-in mechanisms for stress recovery. They respond to practice. Heart rate variability. The natural variation in time between successive heartbeats has emerged as one of the most informative measures of the body's stress regulation capacity. A higher heart rate variability is a sign of a flexible, responsive autonomic nervous system, one that can rapidly shift between sympathetic activation and parasympathetic recovery. Chronic stress reduces heart rate variability. The intervals between beats become more uniform, less responsive. Regular aerobic exercise, quality sleep, mindfulness practices, and positive social connection have all been associated with increased heart rate variability over time. The metric gives researchers and clinicians a window into the nervous system's adaptive capacity, a measure not of how stressed you are, but of how well your system can handle it. The relationship between social connection and stress regulation is deeply biological. When humans perceive social support, the sense that they are not facing a challenge alone, the brain releases oxytocin, a hormone that acts as a natural anti-inflammatory and also dampens the initial threat signal. Oxytocin receptors are present throughout the stress response system, and their activation genuinely modulates the physiological cascade. This is not metaphorical. Being with people who care about you physically changes the chemistry of stress. Research has extended this finding. Even imagining a supportive relationship may produce some of the same calming effects. The stress response was designed to be navigated in community. Isolation amplifies it. Connection softens it. Sleep and stress have a bidirectional relationship that researchers continue to map in increasing detail. Stress disrupts sleep. The elevated cortisol and heightened arousal of an activated nervous system make it genuinely difficult to fall and stay asleep. But sleep deprivation also amplifies the stress response. It increases amygdala reactivity, reduces prefrontal regulation, and elevates baseline cortisol. The two systems push against each other in a loop that can become self-reinforcing. Understanding this loop is part of why sleep research has increasingly positioned good sleep not merely as a benefit, but as a prerequisite for effective stress management. Rest is not a passive absence of stress. It is one of the most active stress recovery mechanisms the body possesses. Halfway to our first pause, the picture emerging is already more complicated and more interesting than the simple story of stress as enemy. Stress is old. It is woven into the fabric of biological life. It serves functions that cannot be replicated by its absence. The harm attributed to stress is real, but it is specific, chronic, uncontrolled, meaningless stress. Without adequate recovery, without social support, and interpreted as a sign of weakness or personal failing, that particular configuration damages the body and mind over time. But stress that is short-lived, perceived as manageable, embedded in meaning, and followed by rest, does something different entirely. It trains the system. It teaches the brain. It leaves the body more capable than it found it. That is where we are going next. Let's pause here and notice your body as you breathe out slowly. Appreciate what has been happening inside you without your direction all day long. Trillions of processes running in quiet parallel. Heart beating, neurons signaling, cells repairing in the dark. Right now, as you rest, your brain is actively deciding what to hold from today and what to let go. You don't need to participate in that process tonight. It already knows what to do. Notice the soft weight of your body exactly where it is. Notice the easy rhythm of your breathing. You are a self-regulating system, and you are already in recovery. Now we continue. The science of resilience has undergone a significant conceptual shift in recent decades. Early models treated resilience as a fixed trait, something you either had or did not. Current understanding frames resilience as a dynamic process, a set of capacities and practices that can be developed, strengthened, and temporarily depleted. Resilience is not the absence of struggle. Researchers now define it as the capacity to adapt positively in the face of adversity, trauma, threat, or significant sources of stress. This distinction matters enormously. It means resilience is not a given you were either born with or denied. It is something that can be grown deliberately through the kinds of experiences and practices that tonight's facts are quietly assembling. One of the most replicated findings in resilience research is the role of perceived control. When people believe they have some influence over a stressful situation, even when that influence is limited, the psychological and physiological impact of the stressor is substantially reduced. In classic experiments, animals exposed to uncontrollable shocks developed learned helplessness, a state of passive resignation that persisted even when escape became possible. Animals exposed to the same total amount of shock, but with a mechanism for control, showed none of these effects. The brain registers not just the presence of stress, but the perceived relationship between one's actions and outcomes. A sense of agency, even a modest one, changes the body's response entirely. Emerging research in psychosocial genomics suggests that the meaning a person assigns to a stressful experience may influence how genes involved in the stress response are expressed, not by changing the genetic code itself, but by affecting which genes are activated or quieted. Early findings suggest that how we frame difficulty may leave a biological trace. People who can hold a stressful experience within a larger narrative, a challenge in service of something they value, may show different patterns of gene expression in stress-related pathways than those who experience the same stressor as without purpose. This area of research is still developing, and much remains to be understood. But the direction is clear. The body appears to listen to the stories we tell about what is happening to us. Stress can sharpen creativity under the right conditions. Research examining the relationship between moderate stress and creative problem-solving has found that a degree of arousal, the mild elevation of alertness that accompanies manageable challenge, expands associative thinking and increases the generation of novel solutions. This effect operates under an inverted U relationship. Too little arousal produces flat, uncreative thinking. Too much arousal narrows attention and impairs flexibility. but in the middle range, where the challenge feels real but navigable. The brain enters a state of engaged openness that many creative workers recognize as their most productive zone. The deadline that produces focus, the constraint that generates ingenuity, these are not accidents of culture. They are biology. Testosterone, like cortisol, has a more complex role in the stress response than popular understanding suggests. In both men and women, testosterone rises during and after successfully navigated challenges. This rise is associated with increased confidence, motivation, and willingness to engage with future challenges. Researchers who study what they call the challenge-threat model have found that the cortisol to testosterone ratio during a stressful event is highly predictive of performance outcomes. High cortisol relative to testosterone predicts avoidance and poor performance. High testosterone relative to cortisol predicts engagement and better performance. Athletes, executives, and performers who describe stress as energizing rather than debilitating tend to show more favorable cortisol-testosterone profiles during high-pressure moments. The hormones of stress, in the right configuration, are also the hormones of readiness. The gut and the brain communicate continuously through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a bidirectional information highway running through the vagus nerve and several other pathways. Stress affects the gut, but the gut also affects stress. The community of microorganisms living in the digestive tract, the gut microbiome, produces neurotransmitters, including serotonin, dopamine, and gamma-aminobutyric acid, all of which influence mood, anxiety, and stress reactivity. Research published in recent years has refined understanding of how specific microbial populations modulate the hormonal system governing the cortisol stress response. A diverse, well-nourished gut microbiome is increasingly recognized as a biological buffer against excessive stress reactivity. The food you eat is, among other things, shaping your stress response system. Brief. Intense stresses have been shown to have protective effects on the brain. In animal studies, and increasingly in human research, acute stress promotes the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, often abbreviated as BDNF, a protein sometimes called fertilizer for the brain. BDNF supports the survival and growth of neurons, promotes the formation of new synaptic connections, and is strongly associated with learning, memory, and mood regulation. Chronic stress tends to suppress BDNF production. But acute, controlled stress, has the opposite effect. This is one reason exercise, itself a form of physical stress, is among the most effective known interventions for depression and cognitive decline. The stress of exertion signals the brain to grow. The body has a natural endpoint to the stress response called habituation. When a stressor is encountered repeatedly and the expected harm does not materialize, the brain gradually reduces its response to that stimulus. The first time you speak in front of a group, the stress response is strong. The 10th time, it is measurably reduced. The 100th time, It may be present only as mild alertness. This habituation is not suppression. The system is still functional. It has simply updated its assessment of the actual situation. Exposure-based therapies for anxiety disorders are built on this principle. The deliberate, graduated approach to feared situations does not require courage to be permanent before it begins. The courage comes from beginning. The habituation follows. There is a growing body of research on what scientists call stress mindset, the internalized belief about whether stress is enhancing or debilitating. Studies have found that stress mindset influences a wide range of outcomes, including work performance, health behaviors, and physical health markers. Importantly, stress mindset appears to be malleable. Brief interventions that provide information about the potentially enhancing effects of stress have produced measurable shifts in mindset and downstream outcomes. This does not mean dismissing the genuine harm of chronic or overwhelming stress. It means that how we culturally frame stress as purely dangerous versus as potentially useful has real consequences for the biology of the people who absorb those frames. Shared adversity has a well-documented effect on human connection. When people face difficulty together, when a challenge is held, not alone, but within a group, the bonds between them tend to deepen in ways that comfortable periods rarely produce. This is not merely a social observation. The stress response and the social bonding system share biological machinery, and the impulse toward connection that often arises during difficulty is part of the adaptive design. The stress response was built for a social species. Communities that navigate challenge together tend to emerge from it more cohesive, more trusting, more capable of future cooperation. The bonding that follows difficulty is not a compensation for suffering. It is part of the response itself. Physical exercise is, at its biological core, a stressor. It elevates cortisol, activates the sympathetic nervous system, increases heart rate, and produces micro-damage in muscle tissue that requires repair. All of these effects are temporary, and the recovery from each session leaves the body incrementally more capable. Exercise has been described by some researchers as one of the most effective interventions for optimizing the stress response system, not because it eliminates stress, but because it repeatedly trains the system in the full cycle of activation and recovery. People who exercise regularly show lower baseline cortisol, faster cortisol recovery after acute stresses, higher heart rate variability, and better mood regulation. They have not escaped the stress response. They have become more fluent in it. Cold exposure. The deliberate application of cold water or cold environments to the body has attracted significant scientific attention in recent years as a potential stress inoculation tool. The acute stress of cold immersion activates the sympathetic nervous system, releases norepinephrine in the brain, and elevates mood-associated neurotransmitters for a period following the exposure. Research from several institutions has found that regular cold exposure is associated with reduced incidence of illness, improved mood, and increased self-reported energy and resilience. The proposed mechanism involves training the stress response system through repeated cycles of manageable activation, followed by recovery, The same principle underlying exercise-based resilience, applied through thermal rather than mechanical stress. The stress response interacts with pain perception in ways that illuminate both systems. Acute stress activates the body's endogenous opioid system, the brain's natural pain-softening machinery. As part of its preparation for potential physical demand, this stress-related shift in pain perception means that people often report reduced sensitivity during and immediately after highly stressful experiences, only to feel the full extent of discomfort afterward, once the stress response has subsided. This effect is so reliable that it has been studied as a potential window into understanding chronic pain, where the opioid system's normal functioning is disrupted. The capacity of the stress response to soften sensation is not separate from its other protective functions. It is another facet of the body, mobilizing every available resource in service of survival. Stress and time perception are closely intertwined. Under acute stress, subjective time often slows. Seconds feel stretched. Moments feel elongated. This effect is thought to arise partly from the heightened sensory processing that accompanies stress activation. More information being processed per unit of time creates the subjective sense of more time passing. Survivors of accidents and challenging events frequently describe time seeming to decelerate in the moments of peak intensity. This perceptual shift may serve a functional purpose, allowing more information to be processed in a critical window, enabling more rapid and nuanced behavioral responses. The stressed mind is not merely anxious. It is, in a specific and measurable sense, more present. We have now followed stress through its chemistry, its hormones, its immune effects, its influence on memory and creativity and pain and time. And what emerges is not a simple story of a harmful force to be eliminated. It is the story of a highly sophisticated system, built across millions of years, designed to respond to challenge with mobilization, growth, and, critically, recovery. The harms associated with stress arise not from activation, but from activation without recovery, from challenge without control, from pressure without meaning or support. The research accumulated across these 40 facts points consistently toward the same conclusion. Stress, in its natural, well-regulated form, is not your enemy. It is your oldest and most capable training partner. And tonight, in this quiet, it is resting alongside you. You're still here, still listening, still drifting through the quiet science of what stress is really doing inside you. Take a slow breath. Feel how your body has already softened from wherever it was when you arrived tonight. We're thinking through something fascinating together. You and I, and everyone listening in the dark. There's nowhere else to be. Let's continue. The science of post-traumatic growth has evolved considerably since the term was introduced in the 1990s. More recent research has refined who experiences it, when, and why, and the picture is more nuanced than early optimistic accounts suggested. Growth is not inevitable after difficulty. It is not universal, and it does not occur instead of suffering. It occurs through suffering in people who have adequate cognitive, emotional, and social resources to process what happened. The three factors most consistently associated with post-traumatic growth are social support, deliberate cognitive processing of the experience, and a pre-existing sense of meaning or purpose. The growth is real, but it requires scaffolding. It does not arrive uninvited. Stress has a measurable effect on cellular aging, but the relationship is more targeted than the general claim that stress accelerates aging. The primary mechanism involves telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes, which shorten slightly with each cell division. Excessive, chronic stress has been associated with accelerated telomere shortening in certain cell populations, particularly immune cells. However, more recent research has found that the relationship between stress and telomere length is strongly modulated by factors including exercise, sleep quality, social connection, and the meaning attributed to the stressful experience. People who experience stress but perceive it as purposeful show less telomere shortening than those experiencing stress perceived as without direction. The cells, it appears, are also attentive to the story. A specific type of stress, the kind involving social challenge or felt isolation, activates a gene expression pattern that researchers have studied closely. This program shifts the body toward inflammation and away from the antibody responses more suited to stable, connected living. The body, it seems, responds to loneliness differently than it responds to other challenges at the level of the genome itself. In the long term, if this pattern is sustained, chronic inflammation becomes the dominant signal, which is associated with a wide range of health conditions. The human genome, shaped by millions of years of social living, remains exquisitely sensitive to the social environment. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region most involved in planning, reasoning, and emotional regulation, is among the most stress-sensitive structures in the brain. Acute stress temporarily impairs its function, which is why, under pressure, people sometimes make decisions that seem obviously different in calmer retrospect. But chronic stress does more than temporarily impair the prefrontal cortex. It physically remodels it. Prolonged elevated cortisol is associated with a reduction in the complexity of neural branching in prefrontal regions. At the same time, the amygdala undergoes the opposite change, becoming more densely connected, more reactive, more dominant. The system, under chronic stress, literally reorganizes in the direction of vigilance and away from reflective reasoning. Recovery, including sleep, exercise, and social safety, promotes the reverse. The gut-brain axis has revealed something remarkable about stress and the digestive system. When the brain perceives challenge, it alters gut motility, reduces digestive secretions, and changes the composition of the gut microbiome within hours. Conversely, certain bacterial populations in the gut produce compounds that directly modulate the brain's stress response. In one series of experiments, transplanting gut microbiota from stressed animals to unstressed ones transferred stress-related behavioral traits, and vice versa. This bidirectional relationship means that interventions targeting gut health, DEET, fermented foods, fiber diversity, may have genuine effects on stress reactivity. The brain and the gut are not separate systems that occasionally communicate. They are one continuous feedback loop. Breathing is one of the most direct available pathways to the stress response system, and one of the few automatic physiological processes that can also be consciously guided. Slow, extended exhalation activates the parasympathetic nervous system through vagal pathways, directly softening the stress response. Research on extended exhale breathing patterns, where the exhale is longer than the inhale, has demonstrated measurable reductions in cortisol, heart rate, and self-reported anxiety within minutes of practice. The physiological sigh, a naturally occurring pattern of double inhale followed by extended exhale, appears to be one of the fastest known means of reducing acute stress arousal. The body built the antidote into the breath itself. Music has a measurable effect on the stress response, and the effects are specific enough to be biologically meaningful. Slow-tempo music with minimal rhythmic complexity has been shown to reduce salivary cortisol, lower blood pressure, and decrease heart rate in laboratory conditions and in clinical settings. The auditory cortex connects to the limbic system, the brain's emotional center, through dense, bidirectional pathways. Sound reaches the nervous system faster than most sensory inputs, and the body responds to musical structure almost involuntarily. Lullabies, present in essentially every human culture, are one of the oldest stress modulation tools in existence. The voice, lowered and rhythmically gentle, was the first sleep science. Laughter is a stress response modifier with well-documented physiological effects. The act of laughing, even anticipating something light, reduces cortisol and adrenaline levels, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and releases endorphins. Researchers also found that laughter increases pain threshold, likely through the same endorphin pathways. In one study, simply watching a gentle, humorous video before a stressful task significantly reduced the cortisol response compared to watching a neutral video. The mechanism involves both the physical act of laughter, deep, diaphragmatic breathing with social vocalization, and the cognitive reframing that humor provides. Humor reframes difficulty as something softer, and the body, apparently, takes note. There is growing research interest in what scientists call psychological flexibility, the ability to contact the present moment fully and, depending on what the situation requires, either change behavior or persist in behavior in the service of valued ends. Psychological flexibility is not the same as resilience, though the two are related. It specifically refers to the capacity to hold difficult thoughts and emotions without being dominated by them, to allow stress to be present without it dictating every decision. Research consistently finds that psychological flexibility is one of the strongest predictors of well-being across a range of populations and life circumstances, including people facing serious illness, loss, and chronic pain. The goal is not to eliminate stress. The goal is to carry it more lightly. Halfway through our journey tonight, a clear answer is forming. Stress is not the opposite of health, flourishing, or well-being. It is woven into the fabric of a life fully engaged with what matters. The research points not toward a life without stress, but toward a life with adequate recovery, perceived control, meaningful challenge, and sufficient social warmth to buffer the edges of difficulty. The body was not designed to live in comfort. It was designed to adapt, to be tested, to repair, to grow stronger in the places that were once challenged. Tonight, as you rest, that process is already underway. Whatever the day required of you, it was not wasted. Your nervous system took notes. Halfway through the night, let each breath guide you a little further from the surface of the day. Right now, while you lie here, your brain is sorting through everything, deciding what matters, what can be set down, what needs to be remembered. This process is not something you manage. It is something your mind already knows how to do, has always known. The space you're in right now, between thinking and not thinking, between awake and asleep. This is where a great deal of the work happens. You don't need to steer it. Just stay here and let the sorting continue. And we continue drifting. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, is the body's central stress-regulating system. It is a three-part hormonal loop. The hypothalamus releases a signaling hormone, which prompts the pituitary gland to release another, which in turn stimulates the adrenal glands to produce cortisol. The cortisol then feeds back to the hypothalamus and pituitary, signaling them to reduce their output, a self-regulating loop. When this system is well calibrated, stress hormones rise swiftly when needed and return to baseline reliably afterward. The calibration of this loop is influenced by early life experience, sleep quality, chronic stress load, and exercise. It can be recalibrated throughout the lifespan. The brain contains its own stress-buffering molecule, neuropeptide E. This small protein, produced primarily in the hypothalamus and limbic system, dampens the stress response, reduces anxiety, and promotes resilience. Levels of neuropeptide Y vary significantly between individuals and appear to predict how well a person recovers from stressful experiences. Research has found that individuals whose training requires repeated navigation of demanding situations tend to show higher neuropeptide Y levels over time. Whether this difference precedes the training or is produced by it remains a subject of active research. But the existence of a molecule specifically dedicated to stress buffering suggests that resilience has a neurochemical signature, and that signature can be influenced. Social hierarchies create measurable differences in stress physiology, and those differences are not simply about having more or less status. Research in both animal and human populations has found that what matters most is not where one stands in a hierarchy, but the degree of control, predictability, and social support experienced at that level. In studies of civil servants in the United Kingdom, known as the Whitehall Studies, health outcomes and stress markers were strongly predicted by sense of control over one's work, not simply by income or position. The biology of stress is responsive to conditions of social meaning, not just material circumstance. Nature exposure has a rapidly accumulating evidence base as a stress modulator. Time spent in natural environments, forests, parks, waterways, produces measurable reductions in cortisol, blood pressure, and markers of sympathetic nervous system activity. Research on quiet walking in forested settings has found meaningful immune-related changes from as little as 2 hours of unhurried time in nature. The proposed mechanisms include reduced sensory load compared to urban environments, exposure to aromatic compounds released by trees that appear to have physiological effects, and the restoration of directed attention that natural settings passively provide. The ancient relationship between human nervous systems and natural environments appears to have left a biological residue. The default mode network, a set of brain regions active during mind-wandering, self-reflection, and imagination, is quieted during acute stress. This may serve an adaptive function. When a situation requires attention, inward rumination is less useful than outward awareness. But the default mode network is also involved in creative thinking, perspective taking, future planning, and the integration of emotionally meaningful experience. Chronic stress, by chronically quieting this network, may impair exactly the mental processes most needed for recovering from difficult experiences. Rest, daydreaming, and quiet reflection are not luxuries. They are the conditions under which the integrating work of recovery takes place. Stress and generosity have a documented relationship. Research has found that social challenge, the kind generated by feeling disconnected or unsupported, can be eased by acts of giving. When people engage in generous behavior, including volunteering, gifting, or simply helping someone nearby, certain calming hormones rise. Stress hormones fall, and the perceived weight of the original difficulty decreases. This effect is powerful enough that researchers have proposed pro-social behavior as a genuine stress regulation strategy, not just a moral good, but a physiological one. The body finds relief in generosity. Something ancient in our social wiring recognizes that shared difficulty is less heavy than solitary difficulty. Sleep architecture changes under stress in specific and revealing ways. Acute stress tends to increase time spent in REM sleep, the stage characterized by vivid dreaming and intense memory processing, at the expense of slow-wave deep sleep. This shift appears to be the brain's attempt to process emotionally charged material. REM sleep is the stage during which emotional memories are integrated and, in healthy conditions, gradually stripped of their acute emotional charge. The dreaming brain is, among other things, a stress processing engine. Research has found that REM sleep specifically reduces the emotional reactivity associated with difficult memories. A night of REM sleep does not erase what happened, but it quiets the alarm. Mindfulness meditation has now been studied extensively enough that its effects on the stress response can be described with reasonable confidence. Regular mindfulness practice, defined broadly as non-judgmental, present-moment awareness, is associated with reduced reactivity to stressful stimuli, increased prefrontal regulation of the stress response, lower baseline cortisol, and reduced inflammatory markers. Structural brain imaging studies have found measurable differences in the brains of long-term meditators, including changes in areas associated with attention and emotion regulation. The effects appear to be dose-dependent. More practice produces larger effects, and are observable after as little as 8 weeks of consistent, modest practice. The placebo effect and the stress response share biological territory. When people believe they are receiving an effective treatment, the brain releases actual neurotransmitters: dopamine, opioids, serotonin, that produce genuine physiological changes. In the context of stress, this means that framing a challenge as something you are prepared for, even in the absence of certainty, can alter the biological response to it. The brain does not wait for evidence before releasing its biochemistry. It responds to expectation, to narrative, to the felt sense of readiness. This is not self-deception. It is the body's ancient system, releasing resources in advance of a challenge it has decided is navigable. Writing about stressful experiences has a documented physiological effect. Decades of research on expressive writing have shown that writing about difficult experiences for 15 to 20 minutes over several days produces measurable improvements in immune function, reduced cortisol, fewer physician visits, and improved psychological well-being compared to writing about neutral topics. The proposed mechanism involves the cognitive and emotional processing of experience, giving narrative shape to events that may have been stored in fragmented, emotionally raw form. The act of writing requires a kind of meaning-making, and meaning-making, as the biology continues to suggest, changes the body's relationship to what happened. Social exclusion activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Research using neuroimaging has found that the anterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in the emotional processing of pain, shows increased activity when people feel socially rejected or excluded. This overlap is not metaphorical. The brain appears to use partially shared circuitry for social and physical pain, which may explain why social difficulty can feel so physically uncomfortable and why social support has genuine soothing properties. The brain does not distinguish clearly between social and physical challenge in its initial processing. Both are forms of experience worth attending to. The body was built for connection, and it registers its absence accordingly. The relationship between stress and creativity has a specific temporal dimension. Research suggests that stress at moderate levels during a creative task may narrow broad, divergent thinking, but stress experienced prior to a creative session, in the form of a completed challenge, can enhance subsequent creativity. The post-challenge state, in which cortisol has begun to recede, the nervous system is recovering, and growth-promoting proteins have been released, appears to be a fertile window for creative association. Some artists and writers have described the period of productive exhaustion following intense work or difficult experience as particularly generative. The science offers a partial explanation. The brain, in the aftermath of a well-met challenge, is simultaneously more connected and more open. Stress that is perceived as temporary, time-limited, with a foreseeable end, produces a different physiological profile than stress perceived as permanent or open-ended. The expectation of relief is, itself, a stress buffering mechanism. When the brain believes that the current situation will eventually resolve, it modulates the intensity of its response accordingly. This is one reason that providing people with accurate information about the duration of a stressful situation, even when that duration is substantial, tends to reduce perceived distress compared to uncertainty. The body is not simply reacting to what is happening. It is anticipating what will happen next. The narrative of resolution matters, even before it arrives. The immune system communicates with the brain through a language of cytokines, small proteins that regulate inflammation and immune cell activity. When the immune system is activated, including during the stress response, it releases cytokines that cross into the brain and influence mood, energy, and motivation. The symptoms often described as sickness behavior, fatigue, social withdrawal, reduced appetite, low mood, are partly the product of this cytokine signaling. This system evolved to redirect an organism's resources toward immune defense during times of physical demand. In the context of chronic stress, with persistently elevated inflammatory signals, this same pathway may be one contributing factor in the fatigue and low mood associated with prolonged difficulty. Though the full picture remains an area of active research, we have now mapped stress through the nervous system, the immune system, the endocrine system, the gut, the genome, and the social brain. At every level, the same pattern emerges. Stress is a signal, not a sentence, a call to adaptation, not a verdict of damage. The science of the past 2 decades has increasingly distinguished between the type, duration, controllability, and meaning of stress as the primary determinants of outcome, rather than the simple presence or absence of stress itself. People who thrive under pressure are not people who feel no stress. They are people whose stress response systems are well calibrated, well supported, and well recovered. That is what we are building toward. Gently. Tonight, beneficial stress has been documented across a remarkable range of biological systems and organisms. Caloric restriction, in many animal models, extends lifespan and improves health markers. Through mechanisms involving cellular stress responses, intermittent fasting produces similar effects through overlapping pathways. Heat exposure through saunas activates heat shock proteins, a family of molecules that repair damaged proteins and protect cells under stress. Each of these interventions is, at its core, a controlled stressor that stimulates the body's adaptive repair systems. The pattern is consistent. Expose the system to a manageable challenge. Allow adequate recovery. Repeat. The system responds by becoming more capable of handling the next one. The skin is not simply a barrier. It is a stress-responsive organ. Stress affects skin conditions, including eczema, psoriasis, and acne through multiple pathways involving both systemic cortisol and local responses within the skin itself. The reverse is also true. Caring for the skin through warmth, gentle touch, moisture, activates parasympathetic pathways and reduces systemic stress markers, Touch, transmitted through the skin, is one of the oldest forms of stress regulation. It is not incidental that human infants require physical holding for the healthy development of their stress response systems. The skin is, in this sense, a two-way conversation between the body and its environment. Music, nature sounds, and quiet have different effects on the stress response because they are processed through different auditory pathways with different downstream connections. High frequency, unpredictable sounds, traffic, alarms, activate vigilance systems in the brain. Low frequency, rhythmically consistent sounds, rain, ocean waves, slow instrumental music, activate the recovery branch of the nervous system through the ventral vagal complex. The voice, specifically the rhythm and tone of a calm human voice, has the most direct access to this calming pathway of any auditory stimulus. This is not merely personal preference, it is anatomy. The human nervous system was tuned over evolutionary time to find safety in the sound of a calm, unhurried human presence. Dreams about stressful experiences, sometimes experienced as restless replays, sometimes as more neutral scenes, appear to serve a memory processing and emotional regulation function. Research has found that people who dreamed about difficult life transitions during the period immediately following them recovered better emotionally over the subsequent months than those who did not. The dreaming brain appears to be performing something like emotional calibration, simulating past events without the full arousal of waking experience, gradually reducing the emotional weight associated with the memory. When this process is disrupted, as it is in post-traumatic stress, where disturbing dreams often replay events without the regulatory effect, recovery is impaired. The dream is not just a symptom. It may also be part of the path through A. The experience of encountering something vast that gently challenges existing mental frameworks has been studied as a potential antidote to certain forms of stress. Research has found that awe experiences reduce self-focused thinking, decrease inflammatory markers, increase pro-social behavior, and produce a characteristic sense of what researchers call the small self, a pleasant quieting of the perceived importance of personal concerns relative to a larger whole. Awe is reliably produced by natural environments, music, architecture, and encounters with significant human achievement, a subjective reflection. There may be something quietly sensible about the ancient human practice of lying under a vast night sky at the end of a difficult day. The nervous system recognizes vastness, and in that recognition, something smaller. The concept of adaptive calibration has emerged in stress research to describe how the stress response system learns from past experience. Each well-navigated challenge updates the system's parameters, recalibrating the intensity of future responses to similar situations. This is why people who have successfully navigated significant difficulty often report that subsequent challenges feel, if not easier, then more familiar, more navigable. The system has encountered this territory before and found a way through. That history is held not just in memory, but in the altered responsiveness of the hormonal axis, the vagus nerve, and the prefrontal regulatory circuits Experience of successful stress navigation leaves a biological trace. The body remembers what it has been capable of. Gratitude practices have been studied as stress modulators with growing rigor. Research across multiple populations has found that regular gratitude reflection, noticing what has gone well, what is present that might be absent, is associated with lower cortisol, better sleep quality, reduced inflammation, and improved cardiac autonomic function. The proposed mechanisms include interruption of threat-focused ruminative thinking, activation of social reward circuitry through appreciation of others' roles in one's life, and the generation of positive emotional states that broaden attention and build psychological resources. The practice does not require the elimination of difficulty. It requires simply the deliberate redirection of attention for a few minutes toward what is already sufficient. There is a phenomenon called vicarious resilience, the positive transformation that can occur in people who work closely with those navigating adversity and witness their recovery. Therapists, first responders, and caregivers who are well supported sometimes report developing a deepened sense of meaning, increased tolerance for uncertainty, and greater appreciation for human strength through their work. This is distinct from vicarious difficulty, which represents the negative effects of the same exposure without adequate support. The difference between the two outcomes is largely determined by the presence of social support, regular processing of difficult experiences, and the ability to maintain a sense of purpose around the work. The same exposure, filtered through different conditions, produces different outcomes. Always. Sleep and the brain's internal clearing systems appear to be deeply connected. Research has found that the spaces through which the brain removes its metabolic byproducts are most active during sleep, and that sustained sleep disruption, over time, may interfere with that clearing process. The relationship between stress hormones and this system is still being mapped, and much of what is known comes from animal studies that researchers are carefully translating to human biology. A 2025 study found that this clearing activity fluctuates during acute stress and returns after recovery, a pattern tied to psychological resilience. The general principle holds quietly. Rest is not merely the absence of effort. It appears to be one of the conditions under which the brain maintains itself. The question this video asks, why stress is actually good for you, has now received its full scientific answer. Stress is good for you because it is the signal that activates your body's most sophisticated adaptive systems. It is good for you because navigating it trains the nervous system, strengthens the immune system, deepens social bonds, and calibrates the brain for future challenges. It is good for you because the effort of meeting difficulty, when supported, when meaningful, when followed by rest, produces the kind of growth that comfortable safety never could. The science of stress is ultimately a science of resilience, of a system that was built not to avoid challenge, but to meet it, learn from it, and emerge more capable. That is the answer. And now, in these final facts, we let it settle into something quieter. Almost done now. Relax a little deeper. Your body knows cycles in a way your conscious mind does not. The cycle of effort and rest, tension and release, the inhale and the long, soft exhale. You have been through a full day of this. Thousands of small activations, thousands of small recoveries. Tonight is the recovery. You don't need to hold anything in place right now. Let whatever needs to soften, soften. Let whatever needs to slow, and slow. Simply existing, here, in this room, is enough. We'll continue with the final facts. The body's wisdom about stress is older than any written word. Every living cell, from the simplest bacterium to the most complex neuron, carries mechanisms for responding to challenge and returning to equilibrium. This is not a metaphor for resilience. It is the literal foundation of it. Life itself learned to navigate adversity before it learned almost anything else. The stress response is not an alarm. It is an invitation. The body's way of saying, something here is worth your attention, your resources, your best adaptation. The discomfort is information. The discomfort is preparation. Moving toward that invitation, rather than away from it, is what the research consistently finds at the root of growth. Cortisol peaks in the early morning, a phenomenon called the cortisol awakening response. This morning surge helps the body transition from sleep to wakefulness, mobilizes energy, prepares the immune system, and sharpens attention. It is the body's way of preparing for the day's possibilities before they arrive. Morning cortisol is not a sign of something wrong. It is the body opening its eyes. The nervous system is never fully at rest. Even in deep sleep, background neural activity continues, maintaining body temperature, regulating breathing, processing sensory input, consolidating memory. The state we call rest is not an absence of activity. It is a reorientation of activity. The system is always working. Sleep is simply work of a different and necessary kind. Children under healthy amounts of age-appropriate difficulty tend to develop stronger regulatory capacities than children who are either overwhelmed or entirely protected from challenge. The adult who allows a child to struggle safely, with support nearby, is giving a neurological gift. The scaffolding of challenge, properly sized and safely held, builds the architecture of resilience from the inside out. When people describe themselves as thriving under pressure, they are describing a real physiological state, not a personality quirk or a coping fiction. The hormonal and neurological profile of someone who appraises a challenge as something they can meet is measurably different from someone who appraises the same challenge as beyond them. The brain generates what the story requires. Readiness produces a different chemistry than fear. Breathing slowly changes the chemistry of the brain within minutes. Extended exhales increase carbon dioxide briefly, which dilates blood vessels and improves cerebral circulation. The vagus nerve, gently activated by slow breathing, signals ease throughout the body, quieting reactivity, softening the muscles, releasing the vigilance. This is available to you in any moment, at no cost. The breath is the most direct conversation you can have with your nervous system. Every time you have moved through a difficult period and come out the other side, Something in your biology has registered that fact. The hormonal axis has updated its calibration. The prefrontal cortex has stored a successful navigation. The reactive centers have noted the survival. You carry, in your physiology, a record of every challenge you have met. That record is part of what you bring to the next one. The immune system and the stress response system share so much circuitry that researchers sometimes describe them as one integrated system rather than two. What calms one tends to calm the other. What supports one tends to support the other. Rest, warmth, connection, gentle movement, adequate sleep. These are not separate interventions for separate systems. They are converging signals, telling the body the same thing. The effort is over. You can repair now. There is something quietly worth noticing about the fact that the same system designed to mobilize the body for difficulty also, under the right conditions, generates the conditions for growth. The same hormones, the same nerves, the same arousal, depending on context, duration, meaning, and recovery. The outcome is either wear or development. The biology does not predetermine the direction. The conditions do. Stress, processed well, tends to expand the sense of what is possible. People who have navigated serious difficulty and found themselves intact, sometimes even transformed, frequently describe a widening of their perceived capacity. Not invulnerability, not indifference, but a kind of quiet confidence, grounded in evidence, that the system can handle more than it once feared. This is not bravado. It is a biological update. Recovery does not activate on its own. It requires a signal of safety. Stillness and quiet are among its most reliable triggers. Slow breath, gentle movement, warm temperature, familiar sensory cues. These are all inputs that the nervous system reads as, the effort has passed. You can come down now. The environment you create for yourself in the evening is not incidental. It is a signal, sent deliberately to the oldest and most responsive part of your biology. Sleep is not the absence of stress processing. It is the most efficient form of it. During deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain replays the events of the day, consolidating what matters, releasing what doesn't, filing experience into long-term memory. During REM sleep, emotional memories are processed and stripped of their acute charge. The sleeping brain is a stress processing engine, running at full capacity, doing work that waking consciousness cannot replicate. Tonight, as you drift, that work is beginning. The word resilience comes from the Latin resilia, to spring back. But the most accurate scientific version of resilience is not a perfect return to the prior state. It is a return that incorporates what was learned from the departure, a spring that returns to a different equilibrium, stronger, more informed, better calibrated, not the same as before, better suited to what comes next. So, the question has been answered. Stress is good for you because a life without it is a life without growth. Without the training of your adaptive systems, without the biological signal that something you value is being met with your full attention. The harm is not in the stress. The harm is in the chronic, unsupported, meaningless version of it. The kind that never resolves, never receives care, and is never given the quiet recovery it requires. Tonight, you are giving your nervous system exactly what it needs. The body does not require perfection to heal. It requires conditions that are good enough: adequate safety, adequate rest, adequate warmth, adequate connection. The threshold for recovery is lower than most people believe when they are in the midst of difficulty. The system is trying to return to equilibrium. It needs assistance, not miracles. Tonight is assistance enough. Quiet is not merely the absence of noise. It is a sensory environment in which the nervous system can settle. Low sensory input reduces the demand on processing systems, allowing the reflective parts of the brain to recover. The quiet of this moment, in whatever room you are in, is itself a form of medicine. You have been receiving information tonight, not as a neutral exercise, but as a form of gentle reframing. The brain that understands stress as a training partner, that recognizes the stress response as sophisticated rather than broken, that knows recovery is not weakness, but biology. That brain does not experience future difficulty in exactly the same way. The information changes the appraisal. The appraisal changes the chemistry. The chemistry changes the experience. This is not magic. This is the mechanism. Every cell in your body that was engaged in stress response today has now had hours of recovery. The cortisol that rose this morning is largely cleared. The adrenaline that spiked and receded is gone. The immune activations are resolving. The body is not waiting for permission to heal. It has already begun. You are arriving, tonight, into a process already underway. The last fact is the quietest. It is simply this: whatever stress you carried today was your body doing what it was designed to do, responding to what mattered, mobilizing for what called for your attention, signaling that you were alive and engaged with something real. That is not a problem to be solved. It is a system to be appreciated, supported, and returned to rest. And rest. Tonight, you shall. And so, our quiet journey through the science of stress comes to a gentle close. We've traveled from the amygdala's ancient signal, firing in milliseconds before conscious thought, to the slow, patient process of post-traumatic growth, emerging months after a difficulty. In the quiet of recovery, we discovered that cortisol is not a villain, but a calibrator, that the stress response and the social bonding system share the same chemistry, that the sleeping brain tonight is not resting from the day, but processing it, carefully, layer by layer, in the dark, from the first quiet activation to the last soft breath of a body returning to stillness. We have glimpsed a system of extraordinary intelligence, a system that was never working against you. It was always trying to bring you through. Stress reminds us that a life fully lived will not be smooth. The places where we bend are the places where we grow. Most of the calibration happens in silence, in sleep, in recovery, in the quiet conversations between the nervous system and the body it inhabits. Without challenge, there is no adaptation. Without the signal of difficulty, no growth. By pausing tonight to understand this ancient system, rather than simply to move past it, we have already changed, just slightly, the story we tell about what difficulty means. And stories, as the science consistently shows, change the body that holds them. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can. As deep as possible, think about what tonight revealed, not about stress as an enemy, but as a signal from a body that was trying to help you meet what mattered. Every activation was in service of something. Every recovery was the system returning to its own wisdom. Let your entire being dissolve into that understanding, into the quiet intelligence of a body that has been working on your behalf. All day, all year, all your life. No boundaries left between you and rest. Only peace. Prepare for deep sleep. This gentle journey through the science of stress helps more curious, tired minds find their way here. A quiet like, a subscribe, a soft share. Each one guides another sleepy soul toward the rest they deserve. It only takes a moment, and it means the world to us. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. The science has settled around you like something warm. You can allow these thoughts of stress and resilience and recovery to fade now, like the last light crossing into stillness, leaving only the quiet, unheld calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if every system that has been running today has found its permission to slow and is simply holding you. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way recovery always comes. Not rushed, not forced, but arriving into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the biology of resilience will still be running, still calibrating, still adapting, still becoming. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul. And remember, your nervous system has been trying to help you all along. Good night.